because there's all this stuff it would be fun for me to talk about from this weekend, but then I was like, oh, I can't talk about my friends like openly on a podcast that they would listen to, you know.
Why
Yeah.
not?
So
I guess not.
What part of your friendships? We're recording, by the way.
Oh.
I kind of smoothed
Ask
us
me.
in.
Awesome.
I mean, I can edit this out if you want.
No, let's just do it. Let's do it.
Why
Ask your
couldn't you
question.
talk about your friends over the weekend, Sam?
I just think there would be like funny dynamics to explain, or that I would enjoy explaining, but then it's not good to air those like publicly on a podcast.
Sure,
you know?
sure. Well, if you want, you can air the ones that are about me and you.
Yeah. Well,
They're not about. I think the fun ones I want to mull over are not about me and you. Sorry to come in with absolutely empty-handed, you know.
No, so
I'll talk about my weekend,
please,
I guess.
Please go, Sarah.
I went on a long walk with Alex, and we were walking down. We were in like Sunset Park, where like the Gowanus Expressway is, and first we were just like we were going to get like I guess you can get takeout cocktails at restaurants. I hadn't done this before and didn't really know that this was possible, but this is happening during coronavirus, which is very cool. And you can drink in the street. And we got drinks at this just sort of like corny bar that had opened up in Sunset Park, even though like there's a lot of shit going on there. There's like kind of a famous like red light district that's still there. There's like tons of porn shops. And then there's a huge detention center complex. So we got our drinks, and then I was like, we should just walk over to where MCD is and just like stand outside it, which is the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC.
And just do a two-person protest.
Do two-person. Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking about it, and I was just like, it's so eerie to know that it's so close, and there's thousands of people that are inside there. Like, I just can't wrap my mind around it. So there was no real point to going, but we walked over there and stood there for a little bit, and then we walked past like all of these RVs and all these people who we found out are living under the Gowanus Expressway because there's public parking down there, and if you just pull up an RV and move in, no one really bothers you, and it's like the cheapest way to live in New York if you have an RV, and that's why the people live in them. So that was interesting.
How many people were there?
I don't know. There's probably like a dozen RVs that we could see, but then there's like more than one person living in some of them. So that was kind of strange. And then we walked further down to like this thing called Industry City, which is like, have you heard of this? It's like a series of warehouses.
Yeah, well, we used to take a clowning class there.
Really, in Industry City?
It was in like a warehouse. Yeah, because one of the students had a wood shop there, and he would like lend it to the teacher to do it for free.
Interesting, because I guess it's like a really expensive spaces, because it was like these abandoned warehouse basically that got turned into a complex of like, why live and work and eat in different places when you could have it like all in one? And it's just like, it's insane luxury complex with a scary East Germany style like watchtower up at the center that you can climb up and look down over all of it.
Am I wrong about this, Sam, that's where the class was?
No, like, you could be right. I never knew that was what Industry City was.
I could be. I mean, the class is definitely in Sunset Park. I
It
don't
has
know
a lot
if
of
it was
art
in Industry City.
It's a bunch of art studios there. I don't know who could possibly afford to have an art studio in Industry City, but they have a bunch of them, so someone.
Well, the student did. I don't know how he afforded it, because I don't think he was like making money off of the wood, or maybe he was.
Yeah.
Maybe he was.
There's only one Industry City, and it's the Jaws exhibition at Universal Studios in California.
Man, I was talking to someone who, they were like,
she didn't understand that joke at all, but go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Hold the phone. Who was I talking to? They were like, yeah, I got a nosebleed and I was in the California waters and a shark could have eaten me. I never think about sharks. I've never once seriously thought a shark could eat me.
Isn't it true that in like off of Argentina, like in Patagonia, that's where a lot of great white sharks are?
No, Sam, and don't pretend. Don't bring Argentina facts to the podcast, okay? I'll take care of that.
Not sure. Yeah.
I'll take care of the Argentina facts.
I'd happily be an expert on your culture, Felipe, if you'd like.
I would end you. I would drop you from the top of a ladder.
What do people like to eat in Argentina that they don't eat in America as much?
They eat like a lot of meat, a lot of like barbecue.
My culture's been swiped. Swiped from my hands.
Yeah.
I don't know, meat.
Spaghetti.
They do like spaghetti.
Sick.
Yeah.
Me too.
Spaghetti loving culture. I wish you guys could see the animation that I've put on our video. It's called The Art of 3D Animation, and it's just early 3D animation. So it's just like these weird glossy looking sharks and glossy looking mannequins. Now there's a neon sign with a cat dropping a martini glass. Just early 3D animation.
Felipe, over the weekend, I took that video of you playing with the Oculus, and
Fun.
I sent it to Will because it's a funny video.
And what did Will
And
say?
Will said, Felipe's like in his prime. He's playing a video game that you can't see, and he's explaining it to you. And that's how he described you at your enjoying yourself the most. And I was reminded of that just now as you were explaining the animations.
Do you agree with that, Sarah?
I agree with that, and it's funny because I also saw Will this weekend, and he told me that he really was moved by that video and that I should see it because you were so happy in it. And
Wait, the video of me
really
playing
sweet.
Oculus?
The video of you playing Oculus. He said you just seem so happy, just so fully self-realized, like doing this thing.
Yeah, it's only when I'm able to fully check out of the real world and go into the virtual realm.
Yeah.
It was really like kind of paradigm shifting. It's remarkable how your eyes and your ears, and suddenly you feel as if you're somewhere totally different. But it's really just two of your senses. But you are, I don't know, it's a simple thing to say, but it's really profound when you are transported somewhere else. And then you take them off and you're like where you were. Very cool shit.
Many worlds exist.
We played a game where robots come at you and you can like pull their heads off. And I was just thinking that one cool thing that video games do is they make you feel really strong. If they're well made, they kind of augment your body. And that's what was happening. You didn't have to pull very hard to pull the robot's head off, but suddenly you had this strength, and you felt like really powerful.
We also watched porn.
Yeah, we watched porn on the Oculus.
That was interesting for me because I felt like of the things that I saw on the Oculus, like the 3 or 4 video games I played and the porn video I watched, the porn video reminded me most that I was like living in like a fake place. It was, I encountered the technology and was most reminded of the technology when it was like trying to recreate this like sexual experience in which there were actual real actors rather than like animated robots and stuff. Anyways,
I'll say one thing about the porn, and then I just wanted to ask you if about another thing, Sarah. But in the porn, with the specific one we found, there's a woman and she's just like, kind of on top of you, riding you, whatever, and you look down and it's filmed like presumably there's like a camera at the height of the penis having actor's face, and when you look down you can see your legs and your penis, but the way that it was filmed, your legs and your penis are like way farther away from you than they should be. Like if you think about it, like your neck is like giraffe like suddenly your torso is like extremely long, and that was the giveaway, and it was a funny part of it.
It was the most titillating part of the video.
That's what I like the most.
That's funny. Do you think it would work for you guys to jerk off and watch Oculus porn like at the level that it exists right now, or does it need further advancement?
Sure. No, I could jerk off to almost many things.
Yeah.
If I can jerk off to like just what's in my own mind, then I think the Oculus.
You're absolutely right.
I think absolutely, but I wanted to kind of keep exploring. Like one thing that I was left wanting to do that I'm certain you could do eventually is like have sex with Marge Simpson. Like I want to do that, or have sex with Lois Griffin.
Lola Bunny or whatever,
with Lola Bunny, yes. It can happen. They can do it now. Oh, man.
That's true. I can't believe they don't have it so you can have sex with Lois Griffin.
I'm certain. I mean, we didn't even look that hard. I'm sure. I got to hit up Thomas now, see if I can get the Oculus back. But That's really where the revolution, where the paradigm shift is going to happen.
Yes.
I'd want to have sex with all my favorite political theorists.
Yeah.
Ooh.
What can Oculus do that humanity cannot?
Yeah, like a deep fake where you're having sex with Noam Chomsky.
Yeah. And Karl Marx is standing by, ready to be tagged in.
You can, like, we joke, but you can do it.
Yeah, I think I've told you this before, but I was watching this documentary about Jacques Derrida, and someone asked him, they were like, "You're like the Aristotle of your time. You are the greatest like living mind. If you were to see a documentary about someone like an Aristotle or a Socrates, like what would you be most interested in learning about them?" And he was like, "What they fuck like, and and who they have sex with."
It's being cheeky.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. I hope it's true. I hope he wasn't just being cheeky.
Was there? I think I interrupted you halfway through the Industry City thing.
My Industry City story. Yeah, no, I was just saying it just is a strange, New York City is a strange place to live in. The world's really bizarre. There's many things all in a row, very close together. This is all like within 1 mile. It wasn't that long of a walk. It's just eerie.
Yeah, it's true. It's a big city. We drove through Queens. I like it. It's big, but it's big. It's bigger than you think.
It's a little big. It's a little bit too big.
It's a little big. Yeah, big time. I think that I've kept it at bay, but I think I'm panic attack adjacent, or I was this morning, and I think part of it is I thought I was going to have a second Hell's Itch.
What was the panic attack that you almost had last week, or that you did have?
Well, I think I've identified that my panic attacks have to do with hypochondria, or that's how they express themselves. Like, I think I'm having a sickness. The very first time I had one, I thought I was having a stroke because I'd heard about Aubrey Plaza having a stroke. And when you have a panic attack, your limbs go numb. At least that's one symptom. And I thought that my left side was asleep. So I thought I was having a stroke, and I freaked out. And then this past one, the most recent...
That was at improv rehearsal,
That was
right?
at an improv rehearsal, yes. And then... It was funny. Well, before it happened, I was feeling like what I also guess is called like depersonalization, where you feel like you're sort of outside of your body, or you're like floating outside of your body. And one symptom of that too, I think it's called something like gigantism or something, where people's heads seem like either really big or really small. And I was trying to explain this to my sister, like, it's not like they literally look big, but like proportions look weird. You feel like you're really far away or really close, and people's heads looked like really big. And I was feeling really depersonalized, and then
I've never had that symptom. That's interesting.
I've read about it. Go.
I do get one where I can feel like I'm getting a panic attack where like every time I like close and open my eyes, it's like one opening, everything's normal, and I close them again, and the next opening, it's like surreal, bizarre universe. I'm like, something's not right, and I close them again. I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, and it just like it feels like tripping. So to put it briefly, or like being in a movie or something where you're just like suddenly it's like I'm watching a 2-dimensional like video of my life around me, and I'm not here anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what depersonalization is.
But I never noticed the big heads thing. I want to get the big heads thing. I think that sounds kind of cool.
The big heads thing is a cool feature. It's a cool cheat code.
You need to update your body and not to the next iOS.
Get big heads. Yeah.
But anyways, this past one, what I convinced myself is because I've been seeing floaters, which I mentioned on an earlier episode, and I told the doctor when I was getting my COVID test, and she said, "Oh, are you getting floaters with headache or dizziness?" And I said no. She was like, "Well, don't worry then. That's what you should be worried about." So now, every time I get a headache and dizziness, I hyper focus on it. And so my last panic attack, I was like feeling nauseous and a little also like depersonalized, like lightheaded, and then my hands started twitching. And these three things were just unrelated, probably, or maybe related in some. Maybe it was just because like my body was getting ready to have a panic attack or something. But I freaked out, and I knew I was having a panic attack, and I said it to Sam. I said, "I'm having a panic." But even though I knew it, I couldn't stop it. Like my heart was already like run away. And but then I laid down, and Sam helped me out, and we called a friend of ours, and everything was fine.
Wow, that was on the trip.
No, this was not on the trip. No, that would have been a
This-
nightmare if I had a panic attack on the
Yeah.
trip. No. This was like at home.
That was
like 3 weeks ago.
damn. Well, that's cool you got Sam involved. I always tell no one. And I continue to go sort of white knuckling through the rest of my night,
No.
acting like a little bit weird. And then tell everyone the next day that nice time that they thought that we had together, I was actually like totally off planet and not present in any way and was, having a terrible time.
So your panic attacks are not intense enough that like you can't stand it?
Sometimes, but most of the time they're low level enough that I'm like, I'm just gonna not look in anybody's eyes and we'll get through this. Yeah.
This will be my fourth beer.
Yeah, I had a panic attack, or I took a Klonopin, so I subverted it. But like 2 weeks ago, from just like, I don't know, my fear. I told Felipe about this. I don't even know if this is like worth getting into because it's so like absurd, but my concern that friendship is actually pointless and that relationships don't really enrich your life enough to give meaning to anything. So that's mine are about. But
Whoa.
yeah,
I have a hard time I mean, I guess, I don't understand where that comes from because you're someone who's actually the opposite. Friendship
I think
seems to be really
that's
important
why.
to you.
So that if it turned out it didn't matter at all,
Yes.
that would really be.
Oh, you've hitched your wagon to that. You put all your eggs in the friendship basket.
Exactly.
The panic attack always manifests as this opposite of what you believe in, because, for instance, Felipe believes that all body parts should be exactly proportional to the size of people's bodies. And once he starts seeing something that undermines that belief, he freaks out.
Yeah, I've structured my
Yeah.
whole life around the belief that I should be able to feel my hands at all times. And whenever I can. Reality's turned upside down. Yeah, sorry, go on, Sarah.
I had a panic attack once that I called an ambulance. I went to the hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. This was several years ago. And I was there, and as soon as I got in the ambulance, I was like, I'm not having a heart attack. I'm fine. I'm just wasting my parents' money. And I got there, and the nurse, the doctor, whoever was talking to me was like, oh, why'd you think you're having a heart attack? And I was like, because my left arm was numb and like I couldn't feel like my jaw or something. And she was like, oh, that's actually the symptoms of a heart attack in men. That's not what it would even look like in a woman. And I was like, what would it look like in a woman? And she said, a general feeling of uneasiness is actually the number one symptom. So
None of that sounds
Wow.
right. First of all, I
Yeah.
guess it's news to me that there's different symptoms depending on gender. But secondly, a general feeling of uneasiness is not something that you would go to the hospital for.
And also, it just is funny to me. I haven't written a good joke for it, but like to tell someone who has an anxiety disorder that the number one symptom for a heart attack is actually just having anxiety, it's like the worst possible, psyop.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I might have been having a
you
heart
spend,
attack
like-
my whole life then.
If you
Exactly.
spend like 8-9 hours a day on your computer animating and like listening to podcasts
Yeah.
and stuff, you
Yeah.
may have anxiety and need to go to the hospital right away.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, I'm completely free of all these symptoms.
Yeah, Sam's healthy.
Yeah.
Healthy of the mind, healthy of the
I-
body.
I wake up, people's heads are huge, and I go, that's okay. Today's just going to be like that. I wake
This
up
is
and
fine.
I think all my friendships are worthless and I shouldn't spend all that time investing them. And I go, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm going to have some breakfast now.
Man, what I wouldn't give. What I wouldn't give. So, Sarah, you just start suddenly thinking friendships don't matter, or does something like trigger that?
I don't know. It's not even that I necessarily think consciously the friendships don't matter, but suddenly I find myself, it'll happen like this. I'll be on the phone with someone and we'll be like really sharing our feelings about something, like realizing like our dogs dying when we were kids meant more to us than we initially realized, like some kind of conversation.
Too vibing.
And yeah, really vibing. And we'll get to the end of the conversation. I'll kind of realize like, oh, that didn't really make me feel anything. That just felt like I just said different insights into my inner life without it being any kind of profound sense of communion on any level. We just like dialed in kind of a genuine conversation, but for what? And so then in a sense of panic, I will call another close friend to explain what just happened. and I'll get on the phone with them and I'll tell them the story and I'll tell them how I'm feeling about it, and they'll really hear me out and they'll be there for me, and I'll get to the end of that call and I'll be like, that didn't make me feel anything either.
Wow.
And then I really feel scared. So then I don't call a third person out of fear that it'll corroborate what just happened with the first two. So
I remember hearing a radio thing about people who lose their sense of smell, and the woman who had experienced it, she said that it felt like the color was drained from everything. That everything was like dead, and sounds similar to what you're describing.
It sounds similar. Yeah, it's just sort of like you're still, everything looks the same in a way, or you're doing all the same actions, but it's just not evoking the same emotional response that it normally would. And so then you're like, oh shit, not only is it pointless now, but was it always pointless, and it always will be too? So I guess this is like, I'm describing it like, as a feeling of depression, but it doesn't feel exactly like depression because I still enjoy my hobbies. So I don't know.
do you ever, when you're on the phone with someone, Sarah, are you ever like, you're like, yeah, this isn't working. I'm not feeling anything.
I'm not getting anything out of this.
The sense of color and everything is gone.
No. When I explain this problem to people, they'll always say, "Oh, are you feeling this with me like right now?" As you're explaining it to me, and I say, "No."
Well, good to know, Sarah, because I've asked you precisely that question, and it's precisely the answer you've given me. So this is a good insight into what was happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, what am I supposed to say?
No, yes. Hey, I mean, if you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it.
Yeah, but it's good to lie sometimes. You can't tell people everything.
I don't totally agree with that, but but that's where we depart.
Yeah.
That's our separate spheres.
Are you guys excited for summer? Because guess what? It's almost July.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was feeling really good this weekend. Sam and I did a undisclosed fun thing, or I guess we can disclose it. Whatever. It was nice. I was really happy, and I felt summer's here, baby.
Hell yeah!
It's time to suck and fuck.
Yeah, I think I've been living like the prospect that my entire summer is going to look exactly the way my spring looked, except like hotter, is something I've been mulling over. But I think I'm okay with it.
I'm not sure that's the case, though. I feel like we're going to go to the park. We're going to get, socially distanced food in the park.
Yeah, I had this thought. I guess we're not supposed to eat at the outdoor restaurants, right?
No, sure, but I guess what's the difference between that and eating at a park?
Yes, but I just wanted to clarify that we're not supposed to.
Who says it's not supposed?
We're not supposed to. We're not supposed to. I don't know who's saying it. It's in my head.
No
it's in my head.
I have no idea.
We're not supposed to.
People on Twitter.
People on the internet.
People on the internet aren't letting us.
Yes, and so they're not letting us. Before I realized that we weren't allowed to, I thought that we were allowed to, and I was watching those just like 1,000 different videos of like a protest going by people eating brunch, and I just thought like, fuck, if I can make it all summer without being in a video
and
where
those
I'm
pictures.
Yeah.
I know. I saw that picture and I was like, fuck, man. Like, sometimes you go to protest, sometimes you get lunch.
Sometimes you gotta eat lunch.
Sometimes you get lunch,
yeah,
and you end up in one of those pictures, and then you're lunch Karen for the rest of your life. And you had been going to protests, just taking a break. It's true.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's a funny joke, but then I was like, once I realized we're not allowed to eat at the restaurants, I was like, oh, well, you weren't supposed to be there in the first place.
Well,
so.
Cuomo says it's okay, so...
You're like, you're just asking for a bathroom, like you're not even having lunch. It's like a plate of uneaten food, like near the table where you're standing. Canceled for life.
Yeah.
I know. Well, it's funny. There's been like this kind of counter discourse that's like, we should go easy on the people that are breaking quarantine, because they aren't, if you cut them, do they not bleed? They're human, just like you and I. We're all human, and we might, even the Make America Great Again people, although those people have ideological reasons that they don't, that they want to go outside and stuff. But at the end of the day, I don't know.
Well, it's funny because I don't think of myself as like a lover of going to restaurants guy. Like if you had asked me like, oh, like why do you like being in New York? I'm like, it's not that I like to eat out a lot, but then I was like, if that's the thing I can't do mostly, then like why does my life feel so deficient?
Well,
And I
'cause
guess it was
you
like
can't go to Mike's,
it's like
dude.
yeah, I guess it was like performing and like seeing people like ad hoc at random at events. Um, Now everyone I see is planned, and it dramatically limits the amount of people I actually spend up time talking to.
Yeah, I saw a tweet that said something about like the United States is the only country that's not getting its coronavirus situation under control. All the other countries are, and we're going to be moving into living in just a world where coronavirus never goes away, and we enter a viral winter, a term which I didn't look up what that
What does
means.
that mean?
And I just saw, I don't know what it means, but I thought, I bet this is Felipe's entire Twitter. It's just like tweets like this, and this is why he like lives so on the edge. Because I saw it, and I was just like, I'm not looking in further into what that what that implies.
Let me look up viral winter. Let's find out what that means. Let's face it head on because I think it will be fine. Viral winter. You know, I'm not finding like the famous viral winter. I'm just getting links to things about the flu, so I'm starting to think it's like kind of a commonplace thing. Viral winter.
Read a thing earlier this morning saying how if the U.S. doesn't get its shit together soon, we could enter a viral winter where the pandemic becomes a permanent state of being. So please, for the love of God, just wear your mask and stay home. And this was tweeted by Androgynous Cobra, who's not someone I follow, and I don't know. And no one I follow follows
right.
them. So
this is like the state where it is. We're all getting our information from like Androgynous Cobra. Like this is why we don't know why the restaurants are open or not, because like some like 23-year-old guy called like the Posting Menace or something like that is
said
like,
we can't eat there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And...
I know. Oh, fuck.
Hey, if we gotta go through a viral winter, fuck it. Let's have fun. Let's go crazy during the viral winter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What else
Totally.
can we do?
We just got to make sure that we start a Patreon for this podcast. We get 13,000 subscribers, each paying $5 a month, and then we could survive through any viral winter. You know.
Yeah.
Just have this be our main source of income.
Right. We don't have to leave.
Yeah.
We don't have to leave the house. We can just kind of freeform talk in a
leverage...
kind of quiet way for days on end.
Exactly. We leverage Sarah's 13,000 friends to get them all to be Patreon subscribers.
Yeah.
Sliding scale subscription. It's the perfect plan.
Who knows? I don't know. I feel like we're doing ourselves a disservice, and I didn't invent this. This was like a podcast I was hearing this morning. But I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by like, I don't know, sort of, I feel like we're experiencing each peak and each valley rather than experiencing the kind of overall. And I'm not just talking about coronavirus, but I think that, you know, each panic is like really, really like feels really strong, and each downturn feels really strong. And then if you pull back, you think like 2 months back, and you're like, you remember that thing that seemed like really important? Like, I haven't thought about
the missile that
see, I don't even know what you're talking
Trump
about.
attacked on Iran. That
Soleimani.
was like,
Soleimani.
Killed Soleimani.
Yeah.
I know.
And I thought that we were gonna have to go into another expanded war that we're already in.
I thought I was getting shipped to Iran.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's an example of what you're talking about, but I think so.
No, it's 100% an example. So it's like viral winter. I don't know. I will say though that with COVID, we kind of did the opposite thing, which was like we were like, it'll be fine, and then it was the worst possible.
It was the worst
outcome.
scenario, yeah, essentially that it could be. Something interesting, I think, is that like people that I know are starting to go on like social distant, responsible Tinder dates and stuff. Like they're like back on apps doing stuff, and not even just to say they're fucking, like they're just back to like dating. And I just can't really imagine like meeting someone right now through an app and like going on a date with them, like walking around, like what we would talk about. Something about it, I'm just like, what's the vibe on that? Like that just seems really absurd to me.
Not just because you get COVID, but because you have nothing to talk about.
Because you have nothing to talk about. Everything's fucking weird. Life is like totally made up. I wake up every morning. There's nothing I ever need to do. Yeah.
I talk about my friend's podcast, the podcast I created with my friends, and all the different ailments that they air on the podcast.
Yeah. I don't know. I only date my friends of my friends, so my whole dating situation is kind of furloughed also because I can only see my friends now. I can't see their friends. I don't know who their friends are that I don't know already.
It's true that people are going on dates more.
Yeah.
I'm going on a Tinder date on Thursday.
What are you gonna do?
We're gonna go to the park, I think, and drink and talk. I imagine.
I kind of want to know who it is, but I guess I'll ask after.
Her name's Victoria.
Okay, I'll edit that out. I'm gonna write down this time code. I'm gonna look up Victoria. I'm gonna block her. I'm gonna dox her. I'm gonna dox Victoria.
Yeah. And I have a bunch of exciting things I'm excited to talk about, like where I'm from, who my friends are.
How many siblings?
Exactly how long I've lived in New York. 4? 4. Yeah.
That's a lot. If I was on a date with someone, they told me they had 4 siblings, I'd be like, wait.
This includes half siblings?
I have a step sibling, I guess.
Sure.
But 3 full ones.
So you wouldn't go on a date, Sarah?
I wouldn't go on a Tinder date, but I wouldn't normally anyway. But now, especially, it just kind of blows my mind that people are doing that. Just seems weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm being silly because you always just talk about books you're reading or TV shows you watch or whatever. But
well, it sounds like the pandemic has been hard on your feeling of connection.
That's true. It has been. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would imagine that it's been hard on yeah, I don't really know what to say about that. Yeah, it has been hard. When there's nothing else that's sort of going on writ large in your life and all of your focus is on your friends and how much you love them, that's sort of it's a weird situation to be in. And just talking to people and having intimate conversations, every conversation I have essentially is a one-on-one 2-hour-long phone call about how everyone feels about how everything is going. And that's just a strange social, emotional world to be living in without any sort of respite of just fucking around, really. It's too much.
Sarah, do you, when you're doing these one-on-ones and stuff that you have over and over again, do you develop strategies for responding to people's anxieties? Do you see an overall pattern and then you say a thing with someone and it works and then you find yourself saying that thing over and over again to other people, oh, don't worry about this thing? Or
no, I've found the one thing I've noticed has changed about myself in the last few years is that I've realized that I can actually be much harsher with people than I would have thought. And that I've probably learned. Even earlier, we were talking about, before we started recording the podcast, about sexual assault in high school. And I was saying how I didn't hook up with anyone in high school. I didn't really have any meaningful sexual experiences with other people. But that it's interesting to hear all this because people who are coming forward and saying that they were sexually assaulted were people who I was so jealous of because people sexualized them and they were popular for that. And I wanted that. And Felipe was like, oh, what do you think that means? Or why do you feel that way? And it just kind of annoyed me, as you probably could tell, that you asked that question, even though it was extremely genuine. And I was just you tell me what I mean. What do you think I fucking mean? Maybe 4 years ago, I would have thought, no, you should be nicer to your friends when you talk to them when they're asking you things like that. Now I've realized, no, you can just sometimes be like that. If you're annoyed, you can act annoyed. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I see a lot of this culture around sort of tender, women, non-binary, queer friendships that are all about sort of sweetness and warmth and love. And I'm I think sometimes the greatest love you can give is being harsh and real and mean to people so they don't have to wonder what you're really thinking. And it makes it easier also to be close to people when you don't have to submerge feelings of aggression. You can just vent them out as they happen.
Definitely. Well, I think people like that about you. As my mom said, which I told you, she admired your candor when she listened to the podcast. So
very sweet.
Well, yeah. I think sometimes I guess I'll just say what I'm referring to. When we were in the normal world, when this was before Corona, I often felt that anytime I had a conversation, I only had like 3 things to say. And they were like, I'm working on a play, I'm going to open mics, so I'm doing this. Like my life felt like it was really hard to have a conversation. I felt that even though I was like producing a lot and thinking a lot and doing a lot of cool stuff, I felt like I didn't have anything to talk about. So
that's surprising to me, because I feel like you have such a full life because of those things that you do, and people like to hear other people seeming like they have things going on in their artistic lives.
It could be, but unless people want to hear about the thing itself, I felt like I had like a really like low, like a kind of shallow, like there's like a set of things I do and that's all I do, and if you don't want to hear about that stuff, then I have nothing to say to you. I think that's how I felt. But maybe it's really the problem is that you just like don't feel like talking in general. So little things that you could talk about seem unimportant because you just don't want to share them.
Yeah. That's just something that I experience more and more as I get older. Is like, I feel like when I was younger, all I wanted to do was like cut through the small talk and like get to like, let's talk about some real shit. Let's like talk about how we really feel about our parents and our relationships with them. And now I find that like somebody asks me, somebody I'm becoming friends with wants to hear about, like, tell me about your relationship with your dad or something, and I'm like, don't fucking ask me that shit like that. Let's just talk about the weather and we're going to the beach. They're wanting, like, we like to go to Jacob Riis and something like that.
But when you ask about a question about sharks in Patagonia, you get that shoved back down your throat.
Sam, I was joking earlier. There might be sharks in Patagonia, by the way.
No, I think there are.
I think there probably are.
No, I mean, I get that. Sometimes talking about something, if someone goes in and tries to like start too deep of a conversation
to harvest your emotional data,
then that feels shallow too. It's like, don't be a dumbass. Like, I don't know you.
Yeah, and also like one of my friends, Allie, if she's listening to this, told me that she was like living in the Death Valley in Nevada, and she like was friends with this old like acid head guy who was like 70, and he told her like the thing about doing psychedelics is like when you're done calling, you got to hang up the phone, which is to say, like discover whatever you want to discover, but then like when you're done, you're done. And I feel that way about talking about certain subjects where like I would have thought, like, I'm an open book about this. And it's like, maybe I'm not hiding anything, but I don't need to keep fucking going down the road explaining everything that's ever happened in my life to every new person that I meet. So there's lots of stuff I don't want to talk about. And I didn't used to feel that way.
I was thinking about how this is something that's been happening recently, I guess just because, like, political conversations come up. And even when I, like, in theory sort of agree with someone, I think that, like, talking about politics can sometimes be... like if a person isn't like exactly on your wavelength, it can feel weird when they say something like, I don't know. I mean, this is like adjacent to what you're saying. It's not exactly what you're saying, but just how like certain topics, as soon as you feel like a little bit on a different page, you're like, oh, this isn't worth it.
Yeah.
And I've felt that a few times recently with friends, and even over the weekend, where like someone says something and it's like, oh, okay, like, I don't know. I just kind of shut down.
Yes, unless it feels like it's sort of a profound conversation of discovery about like some kind of subject I've talked about a bunch of times. I'm like, why would I bother doing this? Instead, it just feels like I'm just trotting out like these ways that I feel that I've already discussed like at length with my other friends, and like it's to no end. And it makes me feel the anxiety that we were talking about at the beginning, like this emptiness of like, why are we even communicating? We're not going to discover anything here.
I also think that a lot of people, when they bring up politics, what their real aim to do is to sort of litigate a fight that they had with someone else, with you, or to sort of explain a position that they've been mulling over to you. But they're sort of arguing with someone else, or they're arguing with like an article that they've read. And oftentimes, like with political conversations, I'm like, oh, no one leads with like questions or wonderings, or like, what do you think about this thing? Or this is undecided in my head. Like, help me think about it. It's a lot of people sort of talking and responding to people who aren't in the room. And I think that's kind of boring, because you're like, I don't really need to be here for you to like have an argument with me about
with
Trump.
An imaginary person.
Yeah, that's really about you wanting to argue with like your dad about Trump, you know?
Yeah. I think it's been an interesting thing, this like call that's come with the Black Lives Matter protests for like the real responsibility of white people right now is, or one of them is to talk to your families and convince them that Black Lives Matter and that the police are racist and these different things that I've like started that conversation with my family. But I feel like I was talking to Alex about this, and these Instagram posts that like tell you that you have to do this and how you should go about it don't seem to speak to the nuance of my experience with my actual family and what it is actually like to talk to them, or like how one would ever go about convincing them of anything. And I don't know, there's more that I could say about that, but I don't know if you guys feel that way or not. Felipe is like the number one convincer of his family on political issues. So.
Yeah, but it's not that I'm like breaking down a big marble wall. It's only because I think my mom's doesn't think that much about politics, but my dad is like, we're kind of on the same page about stuff. So it actually takes me like a while before sometimes I'll like talk to him until I find something he disagrees with so that I can be mad at him. But often we're like generally on the same page about stuff. We have had like more contentious times, but I think I will say though that sometimes I'll feel like I'll be arguing with my dad and then I'll find myself like saying stuff that I'm like, I don't know, I read someone say this, let me try it out. And he'll like ask me a question, I'll be like, I don't know any more than that. I just read someone say that. I
respond to this.
Yeah. And I'm like, you might be right. I trust this anonymous person on the internet who said this like more than you. Yeah. But there's been plenty of times when I've kind of decided not to go down some rabbit hole with a family member.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, because I'm definitely not saying that it's not worth doing. I think it's absolutely worth doing. Even if you were to not get anywhere with it, it still is important enough to do. But I feel like with my family, it's like, and I think I've explained this to Felipe, they just don't really think of, I think, these political issues in the kind of conceptual framework in which like issues like structural racism have particular resonance. I don't know. They're just kind of like, I feel like the answer I'm getting to what I would say would just be like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, even to try to explain to my dad, like, why we were not doing the Raisin Man podcast for a couple of weeks, I feel like his response was kind of like, someone told you weren't allowed to do it? Or like, why couldn't you do it? And I was like, because of certain ethical prerogative that I operate under as an individual who's part of a larger community. Like, just these different things that he was just like, so you're allowed to do it if you want to, and you didn't want to do it, and now you don't know whether you should do it because you don't know if you want to do it. And I was like, never mind, let's just fucking not talk about it on this even level. And this is such a small part of it, is like deciding whether or not to do our podcast. So
I do think there are certain assumptions that once you figure out that a person is operating under them, it's like, I remember arguing with like a family, actually like a friend's family member once, and for instance, I think if a person is like a real believer in meritocracy and like they don't like they don't question that as like a thing that's real, as like a force that works in their life. They're just like, yeah, of course, you work, if you make this money, you have the right to do with it what you want, and like that's a really like foundational. It's really hard to fight against that, and you can find like different entry points. But I mean, I think with like the prison stuff, it's like there are people who who like are like, if you go to jail, it's because you did something bad, and it's really hard to shake someone out of. It takes a lot of talking to shake someone out of that, because it's like it's part of a network of like a lot of beliefs that are really hard to shake someone out of if they like really live in
totally. And I think it's a belief in that there's like good and evil, and there's good people and bad people, and that we have a human free will to be operating sort of within a biblical moral landscape where we can either choose to be with God or choose to be against him. It's like so fundamental to what I think some people believe, that you're like, gosh, I truly do not know where to begin to explain all of the cops not existing anymore. It's like such a far-flung idea for some people who still don't look at the fact that like black people are incarcerated at just like a totally absurd rate compared to other people, and think, this raises questions, So
yeah. Well, my friend Matt described to me this story once where he had this journalist friend, and this journalist started getting in an argument with someone at a bar, and like the way this journalist friend decided to argue with this person was not to sort of assert points, but to ask the other person questions, to be like, well, what do you like? They're like, oh, so and so police should just be in like these bad neighborhoods, and he was like, well, what exactly is like a bad neighborhood? And then they would explain what they thought a bad neighborhood was, and then they'd be like, well, what do you think, like why do you think like all the black people live in the bad neighborhood, and he was sort of like, through question asking in a kind of like sort of Taoist way, sort of like lead a person into an unsafe area of argumentation, and they would sort of admit to their own sort of like racism and biased beliefs and stuff. And I thought that was like an interesting form of argumentation that maybe worth employing. And then as a second point to this whole thing is, I think part of me kind of enjoys taking my beliefs or taking any sort of like complex idea and sort of stripping it of its fancy language and trying to explain it to someone in the simplest possible terms. I think it's like kind of a fun exercise, this sort of proverbial the proverbial like sort of grandma test, like, can you explain this to your grandma in 5 minutes kind of thing. And I guess I just think that's kind of fun, and is a fun way to sort of like better explain and sharpen your own beliefs, which is why I think like the ContraPoints lady is so good, because she's really good at doing that, is like sort of explaining things like racism in really plain terms.
Well, the one thing that's sort of that I've never, or I'm unsure about this idea of like you have to talk to your family members. I think first of all, that story you described, Sam, I think is interesting, and it's an idea I've heard before, right? Like, just ask questions, like don't be combative, and actually sort of like lead someone into the conclusion you want to lead them to. That being said, I think there's a lot of research into like it's almost impossible to convince someone to against something that they already believe. Generally, like people leave arguments feeling like they believe the thing they believed at first more. Sometimes there are people who are like open to certain things for some reason that you can't predict. Maybe there's like a button in them that has, that you can like exploit, but it's really hard to know, especially with strangers. So that's one thing that I'm skeptical of, the idea that you can like straight up convince someone. I think especially with family members, where like the thing you're talking about is not the thing you're talking about, if that makes sense. Like you're talking about politics, but really what's taking place is like a fight about your relationship, or a fight about mistrust, or like a fight about whether you as the kid should like have be more right than the parent, like, and all those things. Like you can't get around them, and in fact you end up being precisely the worst person to argue with your parents. Whereas like sometimes it's like your parents will hear things from their own peers the way that we do as well, because like sometimes I'll be arguing with my dad and he'll like be convincing me of something, and I think back to the imaginary internet community, and I think I need to go back home with a W, like I can't, like I need to believe in this thing because people in my community believe in this thing. And so it's like that has nothing to do with the point he's making, and it has everything to do with like who I believe I'm accountable for, or accountable to, or who I'm afraid of letting down. So that's a second thing. And then the third thing is that like, I don't know, there's like this other way of thinking about politics where it's like a fight, like you're trying to win. You don't have to convince anybody of anything. Like, it's like you just like push until you get the thing. And then it's actually making the change that makes people change their mind. Once you like achieve the new world,
we've
then
manifested the new world. Yeah,
it's like it opens up people's imagination to be like, oh, this was always good. And people generally like want to think that they think that the thing they're already doing is good, and you actually change the thing they're doing, and then they're like, well, now this new thing is good.
Totally. It makes me think of my parents, who are always, their preoccupation with picking a movie is always to watch whatever is the popular movie that everybody's watching. So if the popular movie is Moonlight, they'll watch Moonlight. Popular movies, Call Me by Your Name, they'll watch Call Me by Your Name.
So sometimes I think that the kind of mandate to like convince your parents of anything, maybe it works. I guess your family best, and if you're going to convince them of anything. And I think it's also important to feel like you're on the same page with your parents. It can be really like alienating to feel like, oh, we believe such different things. This sucks. This makes me feel bad. But I'm not convinced of its sort of like political use, because I
I think there's probably used to like, I don't know, just having people be awash in these ideas to normalize them. Like when you're trying to do something that is considered radical or far left, like they just need to keep hearing the idea that it's possible for the police to be abolished. So like they hear you say it, and then later they hear Al Roker say it, because my parents on the Today Show. Maybe at that point they wouldn't think of themselves as like, oh, Sarah convinced me, and then this really solidified it. It would just suddenly be like, oh yeah, I think that too.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah, people just need to hear something like 4 times from 4 different places to be like, yeah, that's what everyone's talking about.
Viral winter, yeah.
Yeah, viral winter. We're heading into the viral winter. Yeah, no, I guess, yeah, I go back and forth. There are like ways where it's like good to talk with your family.
Yeah, I think it makes me think of like a lot of my family is Southern, and I think my grandparents who are 85, who I'm almost like, do I really have to call them and talk to them about this, or can I just like know that they'll be dead soon, or like what do I have to do? For them, like for me to call and want to talk about any kind of Marxist structural theoretical views of like how society works writ large and how capitalism underwrites racism, like just to use any of that language to them is to evoke a type of liberal East Coast intelligentsia elitism that they would just be like, we don't believe in the words you're saying to talk about an idea. That is not life as we know it. So I mean, that speaks to what Sam was saying, which is like you say things in a simple way instead of saying the words that are gonna
Well, I think for like Bernie I think Bernie was really good at putting all of those ideas into like the American language, the language of like meritocracy almost. You know, it's like hardworking Americans, like the 1%'s take. You know what I mean? Like he was able to. I think he developed that language over a long period of time, but he was good at it.
And also, I think that changing one's mind is also like a very like vulnerable place to be in, and to have an open mind is to have a vulnerable mind, which is why like I think watching YouTube videos or reading essays about the thing is like a really effective way that it seems to me that a lot of people actually do end up changing their mind and forming their opinions, rather than like in dialogue with someone else where
it's true,
all the defenses are up, you know.
Totally. Yeah, I'll say one other funny thing about this is that my mom has been visiting her parents in Louisiana over the last 2 weeks, and she and my aunt and I are in our own little group chat, and just as it's been the prerogative of like millennials to talk to their boomer parents, I guess it's the prerogative of boomers to talk to their greatest generation parents, because my mom's been trying to convince my grandpa that like Juneteenth being a holiday is a wonderful thing. And like she's just been like looking for backup from like me and my aunt like all week long, being like, and then granddaddy said this, and then he said this, and then I told him this, and I was just like, damn. And then I'm here in another group chat with my brother being like, and then mom said, yeah. so everybody's fighting.
The Juneteenth thing is like the decanted. It's like the safe remains of like the more radical asks that your mom is like, I can get down with Juneteenth.
Yes, my mom's down for the Juneteenth thing. She's like, of course, a holiday to celebrate liberation. Who would be against a holiday? You know, very. She thinks that's great, and my grandpa doesn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell from talking to your parents like what they're saying on MSNBC. I feel like that's what I'm like. Okay, Rachel Maddow's talking about it, or like whoever. Damn, I was with my parents. Maybe I said this on the last episode, but it's just funny to like see the different like political worlds that they were talking about. William Barr, who the fuck is that? What did he do? Who knows? Who cares? But yeah, they were just like all up on this stuff that I have no clue about.
Interesting.
Meanwhile, I'm trying to explain to them the internecine conflicts between activist groups in New York City. The different Twitter wars that
the
are happening.
non-profit industrial complex and the complicity of abolitionist orgs. Yeah. Man, can you imagine? God, if I called my parents and tried to talk to them about that level of stuff. My mom, I think I've said this maybe on the podcast even before, but if I start talking about something that my mom doesn't want to talk about, that she just says pass.
That's the move. I will say too, though, that like, I think there is a tendency to be like, well, if people are talking about it on the internet, it's important. And I found that like a lot of the things that I was like ride or die for when I was in college, now I'm like, damn, that was stupid. And sometimes it's by talking to my dad and him sort of like pulling at the thread that I'm like, oh, maybe this isn't that important. Or like,
like, can you think of a specific example?
I'm trying to think.
I'll say one in the meantime if you need a second to think. It's not an example of that, but just something that I think is funny. I remember in high school when you take like national, state, local government, like every unit you have to start with like breaking out into small groups and writing a group definition for like what is freedom, what is liberty versus security, and like defining all these terms that you're just like, this is such bullshit. Like I know what this is. I always thought those questions were so uninteresting, but now as an actual adult person, I'm like, well, I have no idea what freedom is. Like we should define that. Like what does that look like? Like yeah, all this stuff that I thought was just like so ridiculous. But I guess because when you're young, you're only just like learning to see the world as it even actually exists, much less to be able to be like, oh, is there anything else that's possible besides like reality exactly as I'm learning to perceive it? Yeah.
Are you trying
Yeah,
to?
the big questions become relevant again. I'm laughing thinking about Felipe sort of providing the opposite service for his parents, where he's like, Dad, who is William Barr? And his dad's like, damn, you're right. I don't know. I guess that doesn't matter. Felipe being like, what does the Federal Reserve do? And his dad being like, no idea. You're right. I guess we should care about what happened to Gia and Tolentino instead.
Yeah, totally.
I guess I was going to say, I mean, there are some things I could think about, but they wouldn't be so interesting to talk about. But I guess one thing that I do see is like the pace of my changing opinion, right, based on like what I'm reading on the internet. And one example would be like people who aren't wearing masks, like tar and feather them like up against the wall, and then it's like, or whatever, you know, people who want to reopen, like they're bad people, and then next week it's like, well, you know, it's actually the government that's like blah 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 blah, masks are bad, masks are good. Like one week you're like masks don't work, and then it's like if we wore 100% masks we could start,
we'd be like Hong Kong. Yeah, we could be like water. We should be protesters like water.
Yeah, be like water. And like and I'll come back to my dad with these different things, and he reflects back to me like the speed at which these opinions change, because he's on like maybe like a sort of slower like opinion cycle, a slower cycle of consent manufacture.
Yeah, the cable timeline.
Yeah. And so he's like,
you should get off the gold standard.
As like a stupid example, I think that like this is like not dumb, but like I don't want it to sound like whatever, who cares. When I was in college, my dad was like more of like I'm gonna let that cop car go by. Should I just talk during the cop car? I'll talk during the cop car.
Yeah, dude. This is our reality.
It's true.
The cops are everywhere.
I was like all about. My dad was more like materialist, like like class determines like life outcomes, and I was like more, I guess, identitarian or whatever. And I was like, no, like, but race, blah blah blah. And now I've sort of like flipped a little more. And I come back to him.
Oh yeah.
I've come back to him with that stuff, and he's like, we were arguing about this when you were like 19 or 20, and you were like all against this. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I changed my mind, but like I got really mad at him for it.
For pointing that out.
Yeah.
Or,
No. I didn't get mad at him. I got mad at him.
Oh, you got mad in the original fights
when I was younger for his foolishness. But
yes.
Then it's like, these things are like not as stable as I thought, as I think at each moment. At each moment, they're like, this is the be all end all, and it's kind of not.
I have to pee.
Go pee, friend.
Wow. I don't like seeing kind of uninspired when like lessons taken or like politics taken from the Black Lives Matter movement as it's happening now are like brought into the comedy world, and they are just like these really uninspired visions for like how we can improve comedy that I'm just like
what?
That's not it. I don't think we talked about this one. There's a tweet. I don't want to criticize anybody calling for action, but I just like saw this and was like, that's not really anti-capitalist. A tweet calling for like white people not to submit packets to Saturday Night Live.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
This year, and I was just like, fuck Saturday Night Live. Why can't we just say fuck Saturday Night Live? Like that is the worst fucking show. Like what a fucking rotten institution from the inside out. Like can't we just let go of the Saturday Night Live thing? Like, and the idea of just sort of pinning your radical politics around like the Saturday Night Live audition process is just like so depressing to me. But at the same time, like, I'm always talking about this, like, this is a world that we want to live in, the world that we do live in. The world we do live in has Saturday Night Live. People want to have jobs. It would be better if less white people dominated that show that everyone watches. But I would rather us aspire to the not giving a fuck about Saturday Night Live and not having wonderful comedians who I think are very talented go and work there. And I'm just like, damn, I wish your energies were going to making something I would ever want to watch, because I respect you, and I don't respect Lorne Michaels.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I guess I feel that it's like a frivolous ask, or not frivolous, but I do think it's like a kind of, it's like it's not a political solution really. Like calling on people to like exercise restraint in a way that they understand. We're talking about that tweet that was like, white people shouldn't apply to Saturday Night Live. Did you see that, Sam?
No.
It called on white people not to submit packets or audition for Saturday Night Live this year, so that they would be forced to hire only people of color. I think it also puts the onus on the least powerful people, which are like white artist comedians who don't have paying comedy jobs, who are just looking to be able to quit their 40-hour work weeks doing stuff and finally like get paid to do something. Like, why should it really fall on them? But at the same time, it's like, because we can all do something from our position, and also they're not always the least powerful people. There's a lot of rich white people who don't need that job. So
yeah, but I guess I just think like it's not, and I think this about a lot of sort of, I think people see systemic problems and everybody wants to do something, and often people like have their like small worlds that they kind of inhabit, and they think, well, I'm going to like address these problems at the scale of my world. And I often think those things are like at best sort of patches, and at worst like just like not efficacious, or like don't do anything. And if you like look at stuff materially, I'm not convinced that like a solution where people have to like exercise restraint, because like all
global act local.
Yeah, I mean, are you trolling, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I'm kind of trolling. Yeah.
You want to say more about that, Sam?
Yeah, you got to act local, bro. You got to throw away your 70 cans of Diet Pepsi that you drink, and you got to make sure it goes in recycling. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess all I'm saying is I just want people, when they come up with their solutions, that it be the full anti-capitalist version of like what it could possibly be. But maybe I'm being like a purity testing, ideological, like person setting people up for failure by expecting that.
No, I mean, I think it's true that you can't answer everything with like, well, if you don't, it's about capitalism or nothing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I do think there is such a thing as like putting energy into things that are like misguided, and it can have the effect of like draining energy from people, or making people like just lose energy on stuff that's like not really doing anything, and then think that that's where their political energy has gone, and then they're drained, and it's like that didn't do anything. Like I think there's like a lot of steps that happen before the application process that are like the real important ones, like whether or not there's public education for people to like get, to be able to like write for a long time and get good at writing, or whether or not it's like easy to live in a city like New York where you do comedy every night, or whether or not it's easy to like even have an artistic practice. Like all those things happen like long before the application process, and just having people like exercise restraint, I don't know. I don't even think it's possible. Like everybody would have to see that tweet, maybe like every single person who would apply to and agree with it. And I don't know. It kind of runs. It would be like really swimming upstream, and I'm not sure that. And I feel that way about a lot of ways that I think people try to like apply social justice thinking.
It's a comedy world, yeah. It's anything. Damn, it's so fucking hot where I am. But I have my window closed because I know that Felipe cares about the sound quality being good.
Oh no, you should open your window. You should open your window if that's really bothering you. It's not fine. It's totally fine.
It's fine? Wow. Yeah. Oh.
No, yeah, I hope be comfortable.
Be comfortable, Sarah.
Well, I had no idea you felt that way. That you guys cared about me being comfortable.
No, I mean, I think
put on a sweater. Put on an itchy sweater.
I think the mic being closer to your mouth is more important than the window being open.
Fine, but I'm not moving the mic any closer.
Okay, so
bridge too far.
We're just where we started.
Too far. See, Felipe, you try and act in the tiny little world that you're in, and it ultimately makes you tired. You know?
Yeah, I'm drained. Do you guys want to? We've done an hour. Do you guys want to do the hour and a half, or do we feel like we might be cashed?
We could be done doing it.
Same.
I'm fine either way.
What are you guys gonna do after this?
Just kind of record the 15-20 minutes that I would have recorded on the podcast. say all the jokes I've been holding back on, you know.
Yeah, sure. I have to finish applying for my unemployment, and I'm nervous because I really want to get it on the first shot, and I just want them to send me the fucking money. I don't want to be jerked around.
Well,
so.
aren't you? Doesn't it take a couple weeks to find out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just applied for mine.
For the PUA, Pandemic Unemployment Assistance.
Pickup artist.
What are some of the typical pitfalls?
I have no idea. They just try to fuck you however they can. So you just have to build a strong defense against getting fucked.
There's a part in the unemployment application that says, "What would you buy with this?" And if you write a Cadillac, they turn it down
immediately. Yeah. You have to check a box promising that you would go back to work if you could, which I don't feel. I'm going to try to not work again.
It's such a funny honor system. They just have to take your word for it that you could.
Yeah.
There was one question I had to go back in, and they had the questions like, at any point did you turn down work? No. And then one of the questions was horribly worded. It was like, at any point this week have you not been ready, willing, and able to work? Think about that for a second. Have you not?
At any point this week, have you not been ready? Yes, of course. Every week there's points in which I'm not ready or willing to work.
But it's also the wording is weird. I have not been ready. On Monday. I was not ready to.
It's funny.
I'll say one last thing on funny questions that you get asked. I was never able to write a joke about this, but when I did the citizenship application, they had a question on it that said, are you or have you ever been a habitual drunkard? That was a question that they had in the questionnaire.
That's funny.
Have you ever been the town drunkard? Woken up in the town square with a dunce cap on your head and little children poking you with a stick.
Or have you ever been a trifling fool?
Exactly.
All right. I think we're good to go.
Well,
I think we got the thoughts out.
Yeah. All right, guys.
See you next time.
Peace.